This Week in History.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
All right, Johnny. So, like I alluded to last week, this week is all about the aftermath of Hiroshima and the other bomb that comes and the surrendering and all that. It was such a big, important event. I think I had to devote a whole week to this one. And to be fair, some of this stuff happened at the end of last week, but we'll combine it all.
Right. So not last week we did the bombing of Hiroshima, correct?
Yep.
And so was Nagasaki bombed this week, or is it
But
just
Nagasaki was bombed basically over the weekend or early this week, and then there were aftermaths to that as well, plus the aftermath of Hiroshima. So I'll start with the aftermath of Hiroshima, or Hiroshima, however you want to pronounce it. So I'm looking at the dates from August 7th to the 9th of 1945. So after the Hiroshima bomb fell, Truman instantly announced a statement to the world on a world broadcast that was even heard over Japan. And he said, and I quote, "We may be grateful to Providence that the German atomic bomb project had failed and that the United States and its allies had spent $2 billion, which is equivalent to $28.8 billion today, on the greatest scientific gamble in history, and won." He then warned the Japanese people, "If they do not now accept our terms, they may expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like that which has never been seen on this earth." Although we just actually saw it because you just literally did this.
right?
"Behind this air attack will follow a sea and land force invasion in such numbers and power as they have not yet been seen, and with a fighting skill of which they have already been well aware."
So
basically saying, we'll bomb you, and if you still don't surrender after us bombing you to oblivion, our whole armed forces are coming.
I feel like I feel like in this day and age, should something like that happen, the response could be much shorter from the current president, because people would be able to see what happened. Like, nobody could see what happened. They could get reports on it, and they could, they get pictures of the aftermath or whatever else. There'd be so many YouTube videos up and everything else that the president could just like tweet those out and be like, "Y'all want some?"
Look at the Beirut explosion. We've seen how many videos? I've seen like countless videos of that already.
Oh God! And from so many different angles and many, like, it's been insane.
But different time.
In any case, yeah.
Radio Japan would, and by the way, by forces I've never seen. Like, we were preparing for an invasion that would make the Normandy invasion look like child's play.
Well, it would have made. I mean, it would have made the casualties from the bombs. It would have diminished those, right? Like, like all the reports, all the stats, everything people were saying. Like, if we did not drop those bombs, the casualties would have been insane.
Like, look at the casualties of Okinawa, the Okinawa invasion, and that's not mainland Japan. So I mean, right. My grandpa wasn't like, what a lot of people don't remember or don't know is that all the European soldiers, you basically had a lottery. And if you had so many points, like basically you were in combat X amount of times, or you had X amount of years in combat, you would be allowed to go home. If you didn't make that, you were getting shipped over to Japan. My grandfather, I have in the other room, his whole Japanese uniform that he was going to go to the Pacific with.
Well, his American uniform for the Japan invasion.
For going into Japan.
Okay.
Different.
I was about to learn way more about you than I thought I ever knew.
Yeah, my grandpa turned sides there at the end. I wouldn't be surprised though. I mean, he did enjoy really big-breasted women, so I think he would have gotten a kick out of the hentai that's over there nowadays. But he might have switched sides.
A real quick aside, and my parents don't really know anything, or my mom, I guess, doesn't really know anything about this. But from my grandfather, he was over in Japan, and he not during the war. I don't think. Maybe during the war. I don't know. But in any case, he was in Japan, and he came back with all sorts of like jade jewelry. We have two World War II Japanese military like officers' swords.
The sniper rifle.
The rifle and
597.
And so he came back with all this stuff and never told anybody anything about it. So I might have a cousin in Japan.
You have. I guarantee you have a cousin.
Like
Hey,
a pretty
maybe,
well-off one too. Like,
hey, maybe Chris Blackstock's wife is your cousin.
Megumi, maybe.
Yeah,
I'll have to,
Magumi.
yeah,
You
I'll
know,
have to talk to her about it. We'll see if we can
she knows who her great
trace
grandfather.
it back a little bit. Yeah.
In any case, Radio Japan would respond to its listeners by saying that Japan will be victorious and will never surrender. Yay, propaganda.
Good luck.
Prime Minister Suzuki would meet the press after Hiroshima, and he reiterated the government's commitment to ignore the Allies' demands and to fight on.
Could you imagine
Way to go, guys.
the fall from grace from being prime minister to being a motorcycle manufacturer?
Well, buckle up, Johnny, because there's a lot of fun names in this of modern day manufacturing.
Do we have a Kawasaki too?
No, we don't have a Kawasaki, but we do have like a Mitsubishi.
Oh,
Mitsubishi.
okay. I'll take it.
On August 7th, the Japanese scientist Dr. Yoshio, so Yoshi, there we go.
Yoshio. Right.
Yoshio Nishini, he confirmed that, yep, the Americans, in fact, have an atomic bomb. You fucking think?
Yeah, it can be confirmed. We felt it.
Yeah, we sure did. On the 8th, Admiral Somu Toyota, chief of the Navy, estimated that the Americans had at least one more bomb, maybe two, possibly even three.
I mean,
which I have no idea.
Seems like if you're like, right, it seems like if you're like, maybe they have one more, that should be enough to be like, then maybe we don't want to make them use it.
Right? And he, like, already on the 8th, they're like, they at least have one more. They've got to have one more bomb.
Right. But the Japanese do have a very interesting, or historically have had a very interesting culture regarding death, dying for the emperor, dying for the country. I mean, it's where the kamikaze pilots and everything else. And so, like, death has never been a thing that the Japanese have really been afraid of.
No, and we'll get to what the big hang up on the surrender was here in a minute. But a radio transmission code would be broken by the Allied forces, specifically the United States, which was intercepted from the Japanese cabinet to other Japanese government officials that said there would be more destruction, but the war would go on. So we already know on the 8th. So this whole, like, when I was growing up, I was like, well, they were trying to surrender, but we didn't give them enough time. No, they make it clear. There was nobody that was talking about surrendering before the second bomb was dropped to any significant degree.
I guess I've never really put a whole lot of thought into it specifically, but I guess my assumption was always that we dropped bomb 1 and then we dropped bomb 2, and that was the end of the plan. Like, we were like, we're going to drop 2 bombs from the get-go, and then that was going to be it, and then, you know,
that was the hope. The hope is that after we drop the atomic bomb or bombs, they would give up, but we weren't entirely sure if that was
right. But I thought 2 of them was, I thought from the get-go 2 was a plan.
Yeah, from the get-go there was plans for 2. Like, we had.
Oh, okay. So that was
right from the start. We had 2 bombs assembled and ready. We had Little Man and Fat Man. They were ready to go. Assembled.
Right.
Like, they can go anytime.
Okay.
Now,
but there were people who were saying maybe in between, after the first one, maybe they were wanting to surrender.
Well, there's
might be
people
enough.
who argue, and I'm not getting into whether we should have done it or shouldn't have done it, or the ethical argument for that.
There's plenty of places
but there
for
is
that.
the argument that a lot of people are under the impression that we shouldn't have dropped the second one because they were in the process of negotiating peace. They were not in the process of negotiating peace. Not to what would have been acceptable to the Allies, and not what would have been acceptable to the Japanese.
Well, and I'm sure some people were like, maybe we should surrender, but if it's not coming from your high up officials, it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah. Between the 7th and the 9th, there was, at least to our knowledge, there was no indication of any meeting about surrender. And what we had intercepted from their government was, and I quote, there would be more destruction, but the war will go on. So the Japanese government is saying the war is going to go on.
Yikes.
That's the important part.
Like, these are human beings that are being like, yeah, sure, we just had an entire city destroyed. And you know what? It's probably going to happen again. But some of you may die, but that's a risk I'm willing to take.
That's a risk I'm willing to take. Hopefully it doesn't happen to my city. So the original plan for the second bomb was that it was going to be dropped in Kokura on August 11th. But bad weather for basically a 5-day period had forced them to move the timetable up to the 9th. At 3:47 a.m., B-29 Boxcar, which Johnny, you've seen before. We've seen it together. You've seen it with your kiddo. It's down in Dayton Air Force.
Uh-huh.
Would take off from Tinian Island with 2 additional B-29s in tow. Like I said, the target was Kukora Island. Or not Kukora Island, but Kukora City. But Boxcar had a faulty fuel pump, and after spending about 50 minutes over Kukura doing 3 separate bomb runs, the city was covered in smoke. The city was covered in smoke because like a 29 crew B-29 bombing crew of fire bombs devastated the Yahata city, which is right next door to Kukura, and covered the whole damn city in smoke, so they couldn't see their target.
Okay, wait. So Nagasaki was not the initial
not the primary target. No.
Primary target.
No, it was Kukura.
And before they decided to drop an atomic bomb, they firebombed the city?
They firebombed the city next to it.
Okay, so this was a separate squadron or whatever.
A separate squadron went out.
Firebombed that. The winds brought the smoke over the city.
Yeah, they bombed Yahata, firebombed it. The smoke carried over Kukura.
Gotcha.
And basically made it so you couldn't, it's an atomic bomb, guys. You really don't need to be precise with this. It's a to whom it may concern letter, but they couldn't get a clear picture. They ran 3 times over Kukura with 3 bombing runs, couldn't get a clear picture, didn't drop the bomb, decided that because of the faulty fuel pump on Boxcar, they didn't have enough fuel to make it all the way back if they spend any more time. So they divert to their secondary target, which is Nagasaki.
So quick question here. Did Nagasaki get a "Hey, you're a second option" pamphlet dropped on them?
I don't think they did.
Because that's pretty fucked. Because for Hiroshima, they dropped all those little pamphlets saying, "Hey guys, we're gonna bomb the shit out of you. It's basically a hurricane warning. Go ahead." And then they're like, "Okay, City 2. Oh, not gonna do that. I guess we'll go to Nagasaki instead." And then just not warn them.
Yeah. They want
Christ.
That one. But Nagasaki, it was chosen because it is a port city with a lot of military strategic targets. There's a Mitsubishi plant there as well, and it does have military significance. But it's also in the hills, and most of their buildings are traditional Japanese style wood paper construction.
Yeah.
So not the most resilient to explosions, but it was specifically off limits for firebombing, so it was a prime target. Like it was a relatively intact city.
Can I ask why it was off target for firebombing?
I think because it was a target of interest for the bomb. Just to
you're not going to want
you're not going to want to drop an atomic bomb on a city that's already destroyed. You want to
show. Okay, so it was just to keep it fresh.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you're not going and cleaning up the leftovers that the firebombs left behind.
Yep. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb Fat Man, which is 11 pounds of plutonium, hits a tennis court halfway between the Mitsubishi Steel and Arms Work and the Nagasaki Arsenal.
Wait, they didn't blow this one up in the air?
Well, it does, but it's above a tennis court. The same thing.
Okay, gotcha.
But Nagasaki is in the hills, so due to the hilly terrain, this bomb, even though it's more powerful than the Fat Man, is actually causing less destruction because the hills absorb most of it.
Yeah, this one was Fat Man, right? Little Boy, it was the first one.
Yeah. Sorry, excuse me. This is Fat Man.
So really bombing that probably, that saved lives, right?
It did.
Because it is basically a big shield from those sides. And there's a little bit of radiation, I'm sure.
Hiroshima was like
the initial
60% total destruction. Like they said 60% of the buildings were completely gone.
Yeah.
And like 70% were damaged. So basically 30% of the city was untouched, but the rest of it was just destroyed. Not quite nearly as bad here. It was more like 25 to 40%.
Yeah, which is still
a lot, but not.
Fishers is a town of 90,000, so 25% is like 20,000 people, like 23,000 people, whatever. That's nuts.
The instant casualty reports are all over the place. They say basically between 22,000 and up to 75,000 were instantly killed. The more official reports place it like at least 35,000 died, maybe 60. There's really no clear
How I
how
mean,
many
how would
died.
you know? Because you're the initial. Obviously, you'll be able to say, okay, well, this is a center point, and everybody in this radius died immediately. But there are going to be people in partially destructed buildings buried under rubble that are going to die later. They're going that
And
didn't die from the initial blast, and there's going to
they
be
don't even know how many people are in the city. Like there are,
right.
it's a refuge point, and we'll get there in a second. But unlike Hiroshima, which was primarily a military target that did have a lot of military casualties, only 150 actual military casualties were confirmed at Nagasaki. So all the deaths were civilian.
I feel
Whoops.
like that might be against those little rules of war that we made up along the line
Yeah,
somewhere,
we
or at
whoopsied
least
that.
at the very least a big no.
Yeah, we whoops that one. I'll give full credit. Like we killed way too many civilians in this process, but yeah, I'm not, like I said, another episode. We could go too long in talking about the ethics of it, whether we should or shouldn't have.
No, if you're interested in the ethical debate of it, there are plenty of resources with people going back and forth and discussing it. But
Yep.
like the fact of the matter is, this is what happened, and what happened was insane, and a
Exactly.
whole lot of people died from it.
They sure did. So the aftermath of this, and I first want to point out that, like I said, it was a refuge spot. We know that as many as 200 people survived both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because at least 200 survivors from Hiroshima were sent to Nagasaki for
Yeah,
shelter and aid,
yeah.
and
That's the
survived that bomb as well.
that's a crazy thing. Like, could you imagine?
Having to survive both. I did hear of a tale of a guy who worked in, like lived in Nagasaki and worked in Hiroshima, and he took the train in to Hiroshima
Yeah, so
that morning
he was in the
and
right spot
bombed
at
and
the right time.
survived, and then went back to and then bombed there and survived again. Like bad luck, dude. Just I don't want to be anywhere near you.
Yeah. See,
Or
like,
great luck, depending on how you look at it. Like you
I mean, he's
survived
alive.
2 nukes.
He's alive, right?
Bad luck for
Like,
being there, but good luck for surviving it.
yeah.
The U.S. and this is new to me. I didn't know this because I thought we had 2 bombs ready to go. I didn't know how many we actually had. We did have another Fat Man bomb that was ready for use on the 19th. So had Japan not surrendered, there was another bomb already
Another
ready to
one
be used on
coming.
the 19th.
I think I knew there was one more because I think I read somewhere that there was like I think I read this city somewhere that was going to be the planned target of attack. Don't remember what it was, but I think I remember that.
Well, Tokyo was a target, but it really wasn't because most of Tokyo was gone by the firebombing. So
Yeah. Yeah, again, it was one of those situations where they're like, why would we waste an atomic bomb on a city that we've already decimated?
yep. There were actually 3 more bombs in addition to that would have been ready by September, and 3 more that would have been ready by October. These are all the Fat Mans. There was a second Little Boy that was in production and became ready on December 24th. So Jesus Christ, we're at the beginning of the nuclear age, and we already have an ass ton of nukes, like
Yeah.
ready to go.
I mean, yeah, don't look up how many we have now.
Yeah. On August 9th at 2:30 p.m., the Japanese War Council would acknowledge that victory was unlikely. You think? But still refused unconditional surrender, and they wanted to fight on. There was not a unanimous decision at that meeting, and so by default, war is continuing. There was another meeting at 10 o'clock that night. Again, no decision was made. Another meeting on August 10th. Again, no decision was made. It wasn't until August 12th when the emperor informed his family that he had full intentions of surrendering.
Yeah, I feel like so much of this goes back to just the Japanese their general culture regarding death, regarding honor, regarding country, and like they spent so much invested in their own culture, country, and
They are a
so
interesting
little in their
country
own
that
lives.
I want to study the culture more because I know what
Oh,
I've
it's
been told
fascinating.
from myth and stuff, but I really want to actually, like, from a historical standpoint, like actually like learn about the Japanese culture
Yeah, we
on a
should do it.
more like, I don't want to just be like, the Last Samurai movie. Like I want to know like what
Right.
a little bit
Well,
more.
I mean, Japan's gone through so many iterations of interesting cultural things because it's an island nation, which
Yeah.
immediately makes it incredibly interesting to look at and study because it's so isolated from everything else. It's like, it's
Well, they
kind
were
of
so late to come on to the modern world. I mean,
right.
the
It's
one thing that Last Samurai does get right is that they were trying to modernize very quickly after the rest of the world had already
right.
had trains and had modern firearms. They were
Yeah.
still using samurai.
Japan's kind of our Madagascar of humanity, in which it's been an island in isolation for so long that they've developed their very own special kind of living situation and culture and everything else. And
One of the big hangups to why they couldn't agree with surrender is that they wanted to ensure that the emperor was able to stay the emperor. So that was kind of a no-go on them. Like we will not surrender if that means the emperor has to abdicate his throne or he gets to die or any of that kind of stuff. Like
yeah.
we're
Now,
and
was that? I don't know if you know this, but was that an actual like the Japanese people wanted that, liked that, loved their emperor, and needed it,
I
or was
don't
this
I don't
a?
I know that the government around him and his family and himself, they wanted that. So I don't know if the people
Sure.
actually wanted it or not, but the government itself
Right, and
did.
it makes sense. I mean, you would imagine and you would expect the
The
government
emperor's
to want
God.
things
I
that came
mean,
to the same,
that's the
but
one thing I do know is the emperor is God on earth for the
right.
Japanese people. So I'd
Uh,
imagine that the people were very much in that line of thinking probably as
yeah, I
well.
mean, historically, anyway, they've always been very, very behind their emperor and very supportive of that. But you know, when you start getting nuclear bombed, you start taking a look at the way of life from your
Creating life a little bit
country and
differently, yeah.
see if maybe there's something you can change.
The emperor's uncle, Prince Asaka, actually asked him when he said he had every intention of surrender. He goes, "Well, if they ask you to abdicate your throne, what does that mean?" And he says, "Oh, well, we'll keep going to war then." Basically, he himself, the emperor, saying, "I'm not going to surrender if I have to abdicate."
Right. I want them to stop attacking me, but I don't want anything to change.
Yeah, the Americans agree to the plan. They say that the emperorship is allowed to continue, although sort of. What basically happens is that the emperor is the emperor, and he stays the emperor until he dies in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there's still a current Japanese
In
emperor.
the
But
80s?
yeah, he dies in the 80s. He lives to
You
like
live 40
1986.
more years?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Holy shit.
Um, but just like in London, it's a figurehead position only. Like in England, you don't like you're the king, but it doesn't mean a damn thing.
As soon as you said he got to keep his position, but I immediately thought of the British.
Yeah, because they become immediately after the war kind of a military totalitarianism that's protected by the United. But that's another whatever. That's another story. The emperor's speech for surrender acknowledges the bomb, but ignores the Russian declaration of war, which also happens on August 9th. So Russia declares war on Japan on August 9th. And a lot of people who say that they surrendered because Russia joined the war, in the emperor's speech saying he's indicating to his people that he surrenders, he doesn't mention at all Russia and mentions the bomb like the whole damn time.
All right,
He's afraid of the bomb.
I'm about to just be dumb as hell. Russia were the bad guys for the U.S., right?
Not in World War II.
No, we fought with Russia.
Enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Is that what it was with Russia?
So we were allies-ish, but there wasn't really any formalized we never.
Well, okay, I guess because Hitler was fighting Russia.
So we were fighting.
Also fighting Russia.
In Russia, at the very beginning.
And so what the fuck was Russia trying to do in World War II?
So
why are they trying to fight Europe and Japan?
So at the very beginning of World War II, going way back when, there was the Japanese-Chinese war that was going on. So Japan invaded China.
I mean, that's been going on
before Hitler started doing
forever.
Yeah, Japan had invaded China.
Watch old Chinese cinema; you'll get all sorts of every single old Chinese kung fu movie has Japan occupying their city and trying to mess with their kung fu.
So part of that was Russia was allies with Mongolia. They were fighting Japan through that whole time frame. But before what we declare as World War II kicks off, Russia and Japan have a non-aggression treaty that gets signed. Like we're not at peace, but we're not gonna fight each other. on August
Right.
9th,
So they kind of went against that whole enemy of my
because they wanted
They're
territory.
like, the enemy of my enemy is kind of all right, and I don't want to fight him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So they decided to attack Japan because, well, they want territory.
Right. Naturally. Because Russia
So,
doesn't have enough territory.
but a lot of people claim that it was Russia declaring war on the 9th, not the bomb that convinced the emperor to surrender. But the emperor was not. Again, I can go into this for a long day. Japan kicked the shit out of Russia multiple times. Japan
Right.
was not afraid of Russia.
Japan's set up pretty well to fight most things. Being an island, and especially if they're going to try to be invaded, the thing they're not equipped to deal with is aerial bombs that split atoms, and that's an issue.
Yeah, right. And I can't stress this enough. The Japanese military and government was still very much adamant not wanting peace. On the 14th through 15th, there was a military coup led by the Ministry of War of Japan and the Imperial Guard. So the emperor's own guard participated in this coup, in which they attempted to overthrow the emperor and prevent the surrendering of Japan. It would ultimately fail. It would be known as the KYUJO, so Kujo incident. So by all means, look it up. It is really interesting. But again, I got to reiterate, like, even after the second bomb is dropped, and even after the emperor wants to surrender, the military still wants, or large chunks of the military still want to fight. It's crazy.
I mean, it's a bit ingrained in their mentality, though. Like I've done like Japanese martial arts and stuff, and it's very, very militant. It's very, very, you're doing something that's bigger than you. And so you can die for it. And if you do die for it, that's a great honor on you and your family, and that's fantastic. And you'll be rewarded in the next life, and all this other stuff. And it's just
samurai suicide for loss of honor was a legitimate thing.
Yeah, harikari or harikari, or however you pronounce it. But
harikari is the base. I'm Harry.
No, yeah, he's a Cubs announcer, but I'm pretty sure that's also how you
pronounce it.
Well, how Americans pronounce what the Japanese do when they feel great shame.
All right. Well, on September 2nd, Johnny, Japan would finally surrender officially, and the war in Japan would be over, and World War II would essentially be kaput. We're done. The Allies win.
On the way down, anyway, right? Like so what was between Japan and Germany? What was the length of time like for the surrendering?
Germany surrendered in May. Japan, May 9th, I believe, and Japan surrendered on September, so several months. Long enough for all the soldiers that were in Europe to shit their pants for having to go to Japan, or fearing to have to go to Japan.
Right, yeah. And that's This Week in History.